This is NATO, the largest military alliance in the world, alongside the Avengers. Now, NATO may be a military alliance, but to be a little creative in this video, let's look at NATO's economic power. Is its military might backed up by a solid economy? And if so, how significant is it? After all, this alliance is home to almost 1 billion people. Well, let's take a look and check. Welcome to the Economy of NATO. Hi, welcome to Economics in Action. If you like this kind of content, then subscribe to support the channel. Anyway, on with the video. Okay, so first of all, let's just remind ourselves of who is in NATO. So, as of writing, there are 30 members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, with Finland and Sweden in the process of joining. Within this list are some big economic powers: the USA, Germany, and the UK, just to name a few. In fact, if you combined all the economies of NATO, you'd have a GDP of around $45 trillion, about 40% of global GDP. But this shouldn't really be a surprise. NATO is primarily comprised of industrialized nations that have been economically developed for many decades. However, noting NATO's economic weight in the world is relevant, since large and high-tech economies can power well-funded and well-equipped militaries. Also, a diverse NATO economy is also important, since in the event of a full-out war, a functioning wartime economy with access to a range of natural resources and transport infrastructure makes the alliance a more formidable force to be reckoned with. So, what does all this money pumping around Europe and North America mean for the militaries of the alliance? Who is equipping them with weapons and machinery, and how much of an impact is this having on a nation's budget? If you don't know, the USA is by far the biggest spender when it comes to national militaries. In fact, around 70% of the whole of NATO's combined military budget comes from the USA. However, to give a more fair comparison, since not all nations are the size of continents filled with 330 million people, we can take a look at a nation's expenditure in comparison to its GDP. And once again, the USA exerts dominance in this area, as to supply and operate a global network of military bases, they got to spend some serious money. Now, to be fair, 7 other members of NATO also surpassed the 2% of GDP figure, which is the recommended spending for members of the alliance. However, it's worth pointing out that given the recent events in Ukraine, many countries across Europe plan to increase their military spending, including Germany, which will probably take NATO to a combined military expenditure of $1.1 trillion. But one step at a time. A politician's promise is rarely realized in full, and I have no doubt some countries' announcements will fall short. So now, let's turn our attention to the capacity of the NATO economy to produce arms, since there are plenty of defense contractors around the world, and they all have some place that they call home. If we look at the top 50 arms manufacturers in the world, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, 32 are based in NATO members. This means that NATO's economy has a significant portion of capital that is capable of constructing high-tech weapons and defense systems required in large numbers in the event of a war. We're talking factories, machines, and of course human capital. Those guided missile defense systems require some big brain engineering. And NATO members clearly have a firm grasp on the defense industry as a whole. But now let's jump to another important aspect of a military alliance's economy: its resilience. First, let's start with geography. A resilient economy needs to be diversified, both in what it produces and how it functions. It requires multiple ways of exporting and importing important resources via multiple means, be it by air, by rail, or by road. NATO's economy in this regard is pretty resilient, just look at a map. The industrial base of NATO is split onto two separate continents, with most of the arms production taking place in North America. But either way you look at it, industrial capacity on both sides of the Atlantic is impressive. Goods, military or not, can be shipped between NATO members via multiple ports that already handle significant quantities of cargo. In the USA, there are major ports on the East Coast, both north and south, as well as ports giving access to the Gulf of Mexico and even the Pacific. In Europe, most ports are located in the north, around the North Sea, an area encircled by NATO members, but access routes via the Atlantic and Mediterranean are also available. These various ports allow the NATO alliance to have a strategic passage for goods to travel. Furthermore, impressive rail and road networks across Europe and the USA means there is more than one way of transporting military and sensitive goods around NATO in the event of a war. And wartime logistics is a really big thing, as that's how equipment, personnel, and other necessary resources like food reach the front lines. But wait, what about energy? Europe's economy is not self-sufficient at all, and most of the natural resources needed to produce arms are imported from other countries. Is this holding back NATO? Well, in short, yes, but things are changing. European NATO members are speeding up the construction of energy projects that would produce energy domestically. This means that NATO's economy is becoming more resilient if a war were to break out. But as a whole, NATO's economy would still be home to the USA's and Canada's large natural resources in North America, as well as gas and oil deposits in the North Sea, controlled predominantly by NATO members Norway and the UK. The point being that even if NATO were to be engaged in a war scenario, there would be access points to large deposits of natural resources that can keep the economy alive, even in the face of serious socio-economic disruptions. So, there you go. NATO's economy is large in size and influential within the global economy. And it is also home to many strategically important pieces of infrastructure that any hostile force would have difficulty destroying in its entirety. With the accession of Sweden and Finland to NATO, its economy as well as its military capabilities will only become stronger, allowing the alliance to maintain its status as the most powerful military alliance on the planet. Thanks for watching. Do you think NATO's economy is strong? And what do you think its weaknesses are? Comment down below. As always, like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Otherwise, take care. Bye.